3 of season 3 of our book club, where we have been coming together in community to discuss the book, The Politics of Trauma by Staci Haines. So thank you so much for joining us as always. It's been such a lovely discussion as we invite different community members up to have live conversation and discourse with us. And we are excited to invite you to today's session. So please feel free to use the chat box on the right to let us know, maybe just drop in where you're from and a word of how you're feeling, just so you can get a sense of how to participate with us virtually. Our team at TRF, Stephanie, is going to be tuning in with you, and she'll be sharing comments that you share after each of our discussions, and we'll be making sure to bring them in and have them shared out loud so that you really do feel like you are engaging with this entire book club. And just a quick note, if you aren't able to comment, be sure that you're subscribed to the TRF YouTube channel, and that should give you the power to do so. As you settle in, feel free to go and grab a cup of water, maybe a warm glass of tea. I'll just share a little bit with you about TRF and an outline of what you can expect from today's event. TRF is a 501c3 nonprofit. Our mission is dedicated to supporting and growing a community of clinicians, researchers, educators, and people whose lives are affected by trauma. So thank you so much for being here and supporting us in our work. The book club is one of our many programs. It's one of our community programs, which is actually offered without cost. Other programs that you can find that we offer are things like our conferences and our training programs within our institute, and then also research grants. So in today's session, it's a part of a 4-part series. So we're in the 3rd part. Next week, you will actually be joined by the author, Staci Haines.
Recording in progress.
Q&A with her. Make sure our sounds are all muted there. Thank you. So we will be joined by Staci Haines next week. Each week we bring together up to as many as 15 different panelists. We really do invite people to apply from anywhere in the world and from every background, so that all voices are representing a diverse number of experiences and thoughts. So if you do want to participate with us, it'll be a little too late for this season, as next week we'll be having returning panelists come on, but do feel free to apply for our next season starting in 2023. And to, as always, help us ground in conversation, we're happy to offer a study guide, which is going to be downloadable from the website. And from here, I'd just like to give a shout out to the TRF team that makes this production possible. We have Pat and Connor, who are on our media team, Emma, who is leading this program, is our program specialist, Stephanie, who's tuning in with you virtually, and I'm Teresa, the director of operations here. So let's kick off to Frederick, who has been a longtime community member and has been a moderator for us for the last 2 book clubs. Frederick is a clinician that works with individuals and families in trauma, and it has been just such a joy to be in conversation with him. Frederick, thank you so much for being here, and go ahead and kick us off.
All right. Good to see everybody. The first question. Why do personal transformation, why do personal transformation and systemic transformation need to work together to truly transform? Let me try it one more time. Why do personal transformation and systemic transformation need to work together to truly transform? I love this question. I can't wait to hear what you're going to say. So please come off mic. Let me make sure I can see everyone. I can't see everyone. So So Teresa, if you see people, I can't see anybody but you and I. So,
Looks like Renata had her hand up and then
okay, Renata, please.
Oh, okay. First, this is fun. It's
Yes,
no
yes.
pressure. It's no pressure. It's
No
fun.
pressure. This is,
Um,
we're in each other's living rooms and offices, so this is comfort.
so both of those have to work together because the systems are built from individuals that bind together and have their own personal beliefs. So to have a systematic transformation, we have to have a personal transformation to go along with it. We can have maybe I hesitate with that systematic change without the actually changing. And I'm thinking about like our representatives, that kind of thing, that are going to be voices for their constituents. They're not necessarily changing, but they could be pushing for change that they don't believe in, which is one thing, but that's not necessarily, I think, going to be a long-term systematic change without the people that are supporting it being able to change and transform themselves. Oh, I get to say that you're muted, Frederick.
Yes, I was about to say, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. Let's get some more voices in. And somehow I want to let everyone know how I only see myself and Teresa. So something is odd happening. So
I can go ahead and call on people for
okay, great. Thank you.
Frederick, you have two options. You can either hit gallery up in the top right of your window, or you can open the participants pane and you can see.
Oh, great. Yes, that was me. Because it's the recovery of the flu. My mind is not working well. So let me do Aman. Now you're on mute.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Yes, please share.
Okay. You see, personal transformation and systemic transformation, both of them are interconnected. We can't work on one of them and leave the other. So we should work on both of them. This is how it should go. Otherwise, it will be our work will be wasted. So we just need to work on both of them in parallel to get a satisfying result.
Yeah. So it has to be linked in order to move forward. Yes, that's right. Yes. Thank you so much. Ronnie, please join this conversation too. Yeah, I see other people. You're gonna come on.
I definitely agree with what Iman said. Just to add on top of that, I believe that it's so essential because of the fact that we don't exist in a vacuum. Right? We are individual members, but of one body. And I think that even the author said we have like 300 generations within us. And if we're going to change, we would have to have an influence over the entirety. It's almost the same way of saying psychic growth and interpersonal relationships. If you have intra growth, right, you have to be able to that manifest in the way you interact, the way we speak, the way you act, the way you join up with other people. And then vice versa. If you're actually interacting with people, that's going to affect how you think about things, how you see the world. And it's that level of dynamic interaction that actually makes everything hum in a very beautiful way.
Thank you so much. I'm going to call on some more people. Thank you so much. But I want to share this concept in terms of based on what you're saying, how it's so critical to have these multiple growths. I don't know if people remember, but when I was a child, if you had special needs, your parents had to keep you at home and you're sort of hidden. And that was such a taboo to have a child with great special needs in the 80s and the 90s. And I remember when the American Disability Act began to pass, and then all of a sudden, structural decisions were made in order to give people access with buses and sidewalks, and how buildings were designed. Universal design became a principle, and suddenly I began to see people with various abilities in terms of they were being able to have access to work and access to education, and people began to see people in public. So the laws created structural changes in order to do literal physical changes that allow people to have personal change. And I thought, wow, that was so amazing in that transformation. And I know I'm dating myself to talk about the 80s, but it was true. But let me pull in some more people. Karen.
I was so happy you're talking about that time frame. I'm like, yay, I'm not the oldest dinosaur in the room. Yay. So whenever we talk about transformation, we're talking my love language. I'm a transformation coach and a trauma recovery specialist. And I don't want to say that personal transformation is not significant by itself, because sometimes we have no choice. Some of us live, depending where we are in the world, in extremely oppressive environments. And so doing that inner work, regardless, I still think is huge. But I also agree the collaboration between society making changes and our own personal changes together in tandem is what is truly going to be the most effective. And I also like that you talked about the National Disability Act and the changes that it brought, because there are changes like that that are being worked on in trauma. And I don't know if everyone or the audience is aware, but there's an organization called Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice, and they work with Congress, and I'm now a part of their team. And so if anybody wants to know more, please contact me about that. I'm very new with it, but they have wonderful resources about systematic policy changes. So I'm pretty excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is so exciting. I love this. I love this. I want to say some more, but I want to get Susan in here, and I'm going to try to get more people until they tell me my time is up for the next question. So Susan, thank you.
I think that the vocabulary that the book offers us in terms of power with and power over is really helpful here, because we can, I think I said last week, we can do all the work we want on the meditation cushion, on the yoga mat, in the therapy room, and then we step out into a world that is reproducing structural trauma over and over and over again. And so those sort of structural systems around us, and like I work a lot on colonialism, and one of its big tricks is to kind of pretend that colonialism is something in the past, not that it's a structure that continues to reproduce itself. It's built into our legal systems. It's built into so many things. And so if we move out of the places that we're doing our own work into a larger system that's still continuing to traumatize, we're not going to get very far. We're going to kind of keep having to go back just to get to the status quo. And if we can do that kind of transformative work and then come out, and I think one of the things I love about this book is that there's no end point to this. She sort of says, it's this wheel, and once you've come around the wheel once, you won't recognize, in so many ways you won't recognize yourself. She says at one point, I think, I really love it when I start doing things that don't seem like me, or that seem like something I wouldn't have done at one time. And it's in that kind of ongoing process of transformation that then you sort of scale up, and you begin to kind of really think of how to take the ways that I replicate power over systems and transform them into power with, and then how do I take that out into the world and start transforming different aspects of the power over systems into power with, as I go. And I've heard other people write about them as domination systems versus partnership systems, but it's the same idea.
I appreciate that. And just living in Boston, and Nadia, you're the next. I mean, living in Boston, I realized, for example, Boston Marathon celebrated the 50th year of having a woman run the marathon, and how it took, although someone believed, her coaches believed that the woman who ran had the right to run, they couldn't change the system to give her the right. And they had to have laws to say women should have equal access to these same experiences. And although you can have a personal belief, it doesn't systemically impact people to make transformation in the system. So Nadia, please jump in here. I am so excited. This is going to be such a great night in our conversation. Yes.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I love this discussion. I love it. I believe this question underscores the re-traumatization that happens when the focus becomes, on the response to trauma. So, whether it's the family or, the community she pointed out, or systems in particular, whether the court systems, when somebody is, because of their responses, whether it be drug use or whatever it might be, becomes a part of the system, the focus becomes the outside, all the outside labels, the to-dos, and the person, this is personal, and people that I work with struggles to focus then within. And then if the healing process has begun within, and then so there's shame, but then if there's shaming, and then if there's, isolation, and then there's isolating, it's a catch-22, and there's, re-triggering, added layers. And so if the system and community and family members aren't changing the language they use and being trauma informed in their responses, in particular labels, and also the media, the original wound is just cut again. And so it has to be a full circular response, particularly due to the power of shame and shaming.
Yeah, and that's really, I appreciate how you share that. And what I think I understand is that you're saying that the system, even if someone does this transformation share, the system in itself, it does what it's supposed to do, and it reinforces, and it could cause even harm for the person who probably had the transformation or spoke up or shared. But then the system, because of how it's designed, the power over impact, it can many ways harm the one who's voiced an issue, right, or concern, and that in itself, in many ways, reinforce the system and harm the one who has less power. Wow, correct. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know we are near the end, but Tamara, we want to get you in just to share. This has been so good, and we are about to have such an amazing movement forward today. So this is some good stuff to go through. Tamara, you're the last one, but thank you.
Hi, yeah, I love everybody's answers so far, and I have to go to Staci's book, where she talks about people's attitudes have shifted, but the systems driving, white supremacy and climate destruction and capitalism, imperialism, they have not. And as a layperson, I just have to give a life example of that. You talked about the American with Disabilities Act, and I just saw today that baggage handlers lost or destroyed 3 wheelchairs in transit, and people were stranded, and can't replace them, and it's just they're just not handling these with respect. And the Department of Transportation, they're huge with. I work there, with the ADA and diversity and equity, and you had to be visually impaired to run a store there, but that's just not filtering down to all of their systems. And also another life example of that is the Federal Aviation Administration came out of the military air traffic control, and it's still like a military mindset for a civilian run organization. So that my brother passed on the ET-302 flight in Ethiopia. And it came out that, this was actually the Boeing people, they made racist comments about pilots. So that, that systemic racism, thinking that, well, they just, do they know how to spell 737? That attributed to a second crash. So that if they had, looked at the plane instead of, blaming foreign pilots and this mindset, then they could have prevented a tragedy. So, these systemic racist issues affect all of us everywhere.
And thank you. And I appreciate what you shared, that within there can be individual changes within people's hearts or minds, but yet the system can reinforce these harms beyond that individual. Like it works as a larger force to reinforce and to repeat, and it can harm. So even if one or two people have a change of heart, the system is designed to work to create the harm or the impact that's beyond that, just that individual. That's what I understand. And Teresa's about to take it away with the next question. I hope everyone is ready. I hope your voices are ready and warmed up for this next question. Thank you so much for all who contributed. And if you can just lower your hand so Teresa can know who to call on next. Thanks, Teresa. Thank you, everyone.
Great kickoff to such a nuanced question, which really seems like Staci does such an amazing job with this book, is really bringing in a lot of the nuance and complexity and being able to talk about it at all these varying levels. So you'll kind of see that in the next questions. You kind of maybe go from this higher perspective. So this next one is looking specifically at discussing what are some current philosophical perspectives that keep us in a power over instead of power with. So what are some current philosophical perspectives, and some examples just to kind of help spur memory of this part of the book is, for example, things like capitalism or individualism, and what can we shift to support power with instead. And something that I really liked that was mentioned in this part, a quote by Prentice Hemphill, was them saying, we are making love synonymous with justice. We're making love synonymous with justice. I love that so much.
I love it too. That was powerful.
Yeah. So any thoughts on current philosophical perspectives that keep us in power over instead of power with? I can give an example. Of course, capitalism is one that, we all like to talk about and point at, but how it makes it really confusing because it aligns our values with that of accumulation. It makes us orient to believe success is the same as accumulation, which then continually brings our attention there instead of on maybe real things like the health of our planet or meaningful community or how to be resilient in conflict. Ronnie.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot in the last couple of sessions about individualism and how it contrasts with collectivism. And I think that it's a very US-centric philosophy, right, is definitely something that we need to expand our thinking about, because the way that we Americans have operated in the last, I don't know, 50 years or so, since World War II, is this is the way that we think about things, and this is how we can propagate that. And it's manifested in the way we do business, the way we do politics, the way that we do a lot of different things. And there's certainly some good things about it, but I think that the idea of self has just taken on a whole level of meaning that nobody really intended. So always thinking about how is this going to affect me and my bottom line? How is this going to improve my personal life? And it becomes a zero-sum game. And again, I always think back of, we're all members of the same body, and you don't see, like when I'm eating, I don't say, okay, here, all the nutrients come to my left hand and not to my right hand. It just doesn't work that way. And so even going back to the last question, and what Staci talks about, she says, you can't mobilize a lot of people if there's no plan structure for change. And so what is the plan structure? It has to be something much more collectivistic. It has to be representative of people who are not the same, not just white, upper middle class, European descent, but people who have different viewpoints, people who think about intangibles and how they think with their heart versus just rational logic. So there's a lot embedded in there, but just to kick off the discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate the individualism. I just, from my own experience growing up as first generation, and my parents came over from overseas. And I remember growing up in the hallways of our house. I mean, the ringing anthem was, it's just you in this country, and you are going to be whatever you're able to do. And I mean, this is really also just the American dream. And so the fact that a lot of our own culture and fabric is based upon the idea that our success is based upon our own efforts, and therefore it's the myth of, I think Staci calls it the myth of pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps. And what's interesting is it's such a, as usual, sometimes great lights can also cast great shadows. And so it's a beautiful light of our country. And I think what we're seeing is the casting of the shadow that individualism has really pushed to this other way, where we've lost the ability to think about collective practices and cooperation. And it just keeps our attention on ourselves, as opposed to really thinking how are we going to collectively work together and heal, and then collectively think about the larger systems and how do we change the system so that it's really thinking about ourselves as a broader unit.
Yeah, and I think that just to follow real quickly on that, I think that the politics has changed so dramatically, in the last 50 years or so. Because when you think about it, JFK, he said, don't ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, right? And that used to be more mainstream. These days, it's very, very much, how can the system benefit me?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ronnie. Holly, let's have you come up.
Thank you. This really reminded me of her talking about collective societies and how even the wonderful tools that we get from mindfulness and somatic practices, whether it be yoga or qigong or African dancing and drumming in community, we're misappropriating them to be power over if we use them to heal, to be more individualistic, when they were formed in a collective context that was meant for the betterment of the whole. And it actually does great service when we don't tie them to having us inquire deeply into how is our wholeness tied up in each other, not in our own selves. It's not exclusive of our own selves, but to really be mindful that this collective energy is what brought them to us, and that's really speaks to individualism and the shadow side.
Yeah. Holly, I'm going to ask you to also pin some more thoughts on that, because we do have a question later that's all talking about self-care and how is our current way of thinking about self-care actually in perpetuating power over systems. So thank you for being on the pulse with that. Let's take one more. Tomra, I think you had your hand up for a while.
Hi. Yeah. So the section about Christian homogeny and also and how sometimes they used, you know, the Christian, you know, in a way of just, you know, shadowing imperialism. And I was really interested in her one section about, you know, the Genesis and the dominion over the earth, the Christian concept that lets humankind also fill the earth and subdue it, just because those Hebrew words to subdue actually is to enslave or rape, and dominion is actually the royal rule of a king. So these words are, you know, they're pretty dramatic, and the translations don't always come through. And I think that, you know, when you start to examine texts like this, you start to realize like where some of these ideas come from. That, you know, and also, you know, we're made in the image of God. You know, all of these things have had huge implications for, you know, how we treat suicide, and, you know, how the church feels about, you know, all these dogmas, these doctrines that sort of haunt us, that we don't really know, you know, where they come from until we start to look back at our histories, and even some of these, you know, these translations. And I'm also really interested in what Holly said about the self-care, and also, you know, appropriation of, you know, things like yoga, and how we just like take them as our own, you know, without bringing over all of the, you know, the philosophies that go along with them.
Yeah, thank you, Tomra. That's it's great. We're starting to see a lot of these interweaving themes kind of coming in. How does individualism impact our culture and thinking? And Nadia, one of our panelists, actually dropped this in, which is great, and a lot of head nodding to this, is individualism also stresses self-sufficiency, alone, trying to heal without help or support. And Tomra, what you kind of say is even the language in these texts, you know, they create the sense of isolation. And as it pertains to trauma, you know, I think a lot of us know that one of the first things that happens with trauma is this isolation. And it's also one of the most difficult things to come over, is how to remember that we are not alone, and that it is that there are other people. And to also just bring in some of the virtual watchers comments as well along these lines, is Tanya saying, feeling like something is wrong or broken in you because of society's attitudes. So yeah, this it's just interesting, this conversation just around how these larger philosophical beliefs have kind of bled down into our culture, but go all the way through texts, through systems, through policy, and into how we as individuals even feel or are and act as these isolated units, as opposed to collectively together to heal. So thank you all for that great discussion. We will move on to the next question.
So the next question is, what does moving to a power width look like? Name some key aspects. And do you feel it is possible? What does moving to a power width looks like? Name some key aspects. Do you feel it is possible? And I would just add a final dimension. Why would we do this as well? All right, Ronnie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that power with has to be collective. We just talked about that quite a bit, but again, just to reiterate that the collectivistic view, recognizing people, hearing them, understanding them, has to be what we uphold. So it's not a zero-sum game, but rather a deep dialogue, very, very authentic, very real. And it cannot be superficial, because even as I was just hearing the discussion about, ancient texts, for instance, right? Like the idea of taking dominion and that being ingrained upon us. It's very much a distortion of what the original intent is. And it can be very easy to do that when we don't sit down with the people and have that discussion. Because when we hear sound bites, it's going to foster quick reactions. It doesn't stimulate the kind of dialogue that happens over a 3-hour coffee conversation with a close friend. One that comes from a very different walk of life from ourselves, has different experiences and different values and systems of belief. And so I would think that anything that has to do with a power with attitude has to be us sitting together, asking good questions, spending the time to listen to each other, and recognize that that's where we all started from. Back before the internet, back before social media, back before 200 characters or whatever it is nowadays, right? And actually hear each other, recognizing that we are more than what we appear. Yeah.
I love that. We are more than what we appear. And I think there's so many great examples of how being collectively organized and recognizing that we all come into the room with different levels of power. And that power we can all leverage, but we do need a collective support. And I don't know if any of you remember, this is another aging story, but maybe 2 or 3 years ago when the Confederate statues were being removed in different parts of the South. And this is a common story people have shared, but how there was a African-American woman who had climbed, maybe it was a Confederate flag. I think it was a Confederate flag, but it was during the time of the movement of the statue. And she climbed a pole to remove the flag. And the officers were about to electrocute her with the stun machine because she was on this electric pole. But a young white male came and said, I am going to hold on to this pole because I knew that they would not electrocute me. And so being power with, he used his positionary power to ensure her safety. And then she was able to come down. And there might be a few details of that I mixed up, but the big idea is that it was in partnership where different people used their different forms of agency to bring about a collective response that was meaningful. I thought that was really interesting. So let me take one more question. Renata.
So I go with what Ronnie said, with it has to be collective. And I think we have to leave ego out the door. And it's, in some ways, it's a catch-22, because to have the conversations, we're going to have to be vulnerable. And I think that starts with, as Ronnie said, getting together with a group and kind of like doing life with them and going, okay, tell me what your experience is, because none of our experiences are going to be the same. I mean, we see that in families with siblings. They grow up in the same household with the same parents, and they're parented the same way, and they have, I mean, Christmas does not look the same in that household for either child. And so I mean, I think Ronnie phrased it really well. Like, it's looking below the surface and seeing how we're alike and how we can help each other, and being willing to listen to the experiences and go, how can I help? How can I help make this experience different? How can we make this better? How can we make sure that you're protected and this doesn't happen again? How can we make sure that 6 generations from now don't have to go through this? And I think it starts with what we're doing, with the conversations that we're having about this, and continuing out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, how do we bring together and recognize that we're impacted differently, and how do we try to address that? Teresa, take us to the next question. This is exciting. This is so exciting. The next question is so for everyone. So I hope you are ready for it. Next one.
I'll just quickly share a comment from Deanne on this question, which they said, all labels tend to distort in the direction of individual views compared to what is based on the original teaching or reality. Well, our next question, we have talking about something that Staci brings up, which is around what are the different sites of shaping, and how can we transform and shape it towards, what are some ways we transform these towards change and life affirmation? So just as a reminder, and again, this has kind of been themes that we continue to touch upon in our questions, but the different sites of shaping she's talked about is really like listing all of these different levels, the individual, family and intimate networks, community, institutions, social norms and historical forces, and then landscape and spirit. So those are kind of the different sites of shaping that she's talked about, which we've kind of picked up on all these little pieces. What are some ways that we transform these towards change and life affirmation? So if there's one specific site of shaping that you want to particularly talk to, whether that's the family level, the organizational level, the social norms or landscape, but speaking to what are specific things we can do in these different levels in order to change towards life affirmation. Aman. And just make sure you unmute.
Well, I guess the main way to transform these towards change and life affirmation is by starting with the individual. The individual himself should work on himself, should gain trust in himself, no matter what is happening outside. He should be strengthened. He gets all his needs from inside. So we bring up a strong individual with strong ideas, and confirming that all the time and working on it, and start to spread these ideas, and let's see, and builds up teams and communities to work together on making this change happen. So we just start, the most important thing is that we start with the individual. That's how.
Thank you, Man. Yeah, and you started to touch upon how the individual, as they heal their own trauma, they become more powerful. It gives us more agency in how we choose to respond. And then we can start doing our change through intentional work, which then builds into our families and communities and kind of continues onwards.
Yes.
Susan.
I think that when Staci talks about shaping, she talks about trauma as constricting, and I think constricting happens on so many levels simultaneously. It's constriction within the body, but it's also constriction in your understanding of possibility and your understanding of what kind of routes forward or routes through or out of a situation you might be able to take. And the sort of the process of shaping seems to be about, instead of it's a loosening of that restriction, which also sort of opens multiple pathways outwards. And so the actual kind of process of working at the bodily level is already starting to change the shape of all the kind of interactions and play that's available between subjects at the same time. I don't think I said that very well, but it's a kind of movement from constriction into different possible mobilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Susan. Naima.
Hi. With this question, I believe it will be important to bring back the systemic traumatization we are experiencing and the conditioning. I agree that it starts with the individual, but the conditioning that we are all subject to tend to stop that process of shaping the world the way we want it. And we need to bring the economy aspect of things that rule the world, because it's nice to be seated with a bunch of idealists who wants to bring conversations and find ways to change things together through dialogue and conversation. But that's not gonna happen. Money is medicine. There are industries that are extremely exploitative, and we are all responsible. And is in those areas where we can shape something that aligns a little bit more with our values. I'm talking about the fashion industry. I'm talking about the wellness industry. I'm talking about education as well. So there are more and more parents who are taking their kids out of the public school and homeschool them because they know the bunch of crap they are teaching them. What about the way we live? The fair trade industry is a scam, is fake. People don't walk the talk. Statistically, all the people who like theoretically organic stuff don't buy them. Don't buy. So we are not walking the talk. There are ways to act. We can talk forever, but it's about acting, especially now in this current time. And we can act in those three industries who are the most exploitative for our children and for people who make our clothes. So apparently, David Beckham got over £1 million for a 2-minute advert about the Football Cup, the World Cup. Knowing that there's all this polemic around over 20 people who died building the stadium. So this is the world we are living, and people are gonna go to this World Club. People David Beckham is an icon. So we are just conditioned to just sit there and do nothing. It's about acting, and there are ways to do it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Naima. It actually brings us really wonderfully to our next question around actions. But just before we go there, it's especially interesting to say that as we come together in a book club in order to have a discussion. And really, in one of our last questions, just to reveal that, is talking about what is the one thing you're going to do when we finish this. And something that Staci does a great job on, especially when she talks about these different sites of shaping, the individual, family, community, institution, social norm, landscape, is that she really goes and connects to it be just talk. It's more than just, oh, well, we have to heal and become more powerful. She says, well, bringing new information and resources into our family systems is what will help, finding new ways to address conflict, making apology and amends, or at the community level, again, educating the community towards equity and environmental sustainability, or on the institutional level, how do we impact what actually gets held as history or what gets studied? And so going into this next question, and with Naima's wonderful next share, really thinking about going beyond just the language of, oh, well, we have to get along better, or we have to be empowered, or we have to change our values, thinking about what are the actual actions for us. So thank you for those shares. And yeah, Frederick, I'm sorry, I kind of gave away the next question, but if you could lead us in this part.
No problem. What are some of the actions we can take to align with our values? And I think you hit it off really well, because there is a discrepancy between what we believe and what we actually do. And there are small numbers of people who do stay committed to something that they believe, and they lead that as part of their life work. And if any of you wonder who they are, if you think of Nelson Mandela, his life work became part of the transformation of a larger scheme. And if any of back in the 80s, when South Africa's apartheid government did not seem penetratable, and there was a small movement of people who made a decision in colleges and throughout the world that they wanted companies to divest from funds that was funding South Africa, and that created significant transformation. That's history, but I know there's other people. Holly, I think you had your hand up, or someone else. Please jump in. I just wanted to say there's so many examples. Yes, Holly, join us.
So this is the question, right? Where does all this talk lead us? And I think of a couple examples in the realms that I work in of restorative justice, and just even the movement to look at the systems, the systems of oppression that have put people in prison. So if you haven't seen the movie documentary 13th Amendment, it just basically talks about how we've legalized slavery throughout the years, and how then looking at the culpability, I guess, of there can be a thought that the person who's in the prison or in the therapy seat is the one with the problem, and often they're the canary pointing back upstream to look at the systemic issue. And so, like, what do we do with action? So I stand for restorative justice. I stand for a trauma-based system that we say, well, how restorative is it to march to the beat of the drum of overworking? That that fosters capitalism. And so when we're talking about recovery and restorative justice and these systems that they live within, the action that I'm trying to take is to stand up and be the voice that says, hey, wait, are we looking back upstream at the system that created the conditions that we're in? And, you know, am I taking responsibility for my part in that? And how can I help educate and advocate so that I'm not just being a helper in a system that is really never going to transform the collective, but instead like saying, how can I work in this system to point upstream and say, how can we change?
I appreciate that. The questions that you're asking, you know, am I just a helper, or what is my role beyond just reinforcing this system? Oh, this is so exciting. Let me get more voices in here. Nadia.
Thank you. I believe that if a level of spirituality was added in all the frontliner trainings, not a forced, you need to believe this, but just an overall basic understanding of the workings of our mind and the ego, whether it be with therapists, social workers, you know, attorneys, any of the frontliners that may interact with a trauma survivor. You know, I'm an attorney also, and you know, teachers, just any little bit of tapping into the fact that where did we all come from? You know, what is our true self? Because when that is even just briefly mentioned, when someone is interacting with the trauma survivor, it will help to free them from the shame and their mind's thoughts. And it may be the only time that anybody has ever even heard the question, you know, what your true self is not this body. And the reason why I'm saying it is because when in the individual healing sense that was talked about when first answering this question, somebody can connect with their true self and what they are. It really goes to the last layer of the spirit, and everything is right in between. And yes, we do need to start with individual healing and somebody being so secure and knowing their true self that when then they're interacting with family, community, you know, the system, and receiving the backlash of norms, they are okay. But if layers, a specific action would be just mentioning that in training, so that when therapy and other interactions are happening in life and all these different layers, it's mentioned. There's no mentioning at all of a spiritual component, not neutral one, in any professional trainings. So I call it spiritual advocacy.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That is something I had never thought about, the role of the more intentional, the role of the spirit advocacy. That is a beautiful framing of that. That's really helpful. Ronnie, please join in.
Yeah, I mean, I love what Nadia just said. I mean, I couldn't agree with her more, because the work that I do with the American Counseling Association, so I'm the president-elect of New York, and we're constantly coming up with feedback. Clients, 90%, 70, very high proportion of Americans and people around the world, even more so, have a strong faith background. But a lot of us are brainwashed in the public school systems. Frederick, probably me and you, right? We grew up in the 80s in the public schools, and we're like, oh my goodness, everything to do with evolution and what is the true self. And to Nadi's point, how can we be secure in our own true self when we're conflicted by what we learn in our families, our communities versus what's in the school? Because what's in the school is dictated by a very small number of people, very like-minded. Just like in the ACA, we have to go with the DSM-5, but everybody knows that was largely dictated by pharmaceutical companies, right? And they're ignoring the components that we talk about a lot here at TRF, like the body and all the different beliefs that everybody has around the world. So even to the point of when we were talking before about taking dominion of the earth, right? That's a very power over versus with concept, or not concept, but a redefinition. Because in the Christian faith, we're taught that we're supposed to care for the people that we have authority over. And so if you are a American citizen and you become president, you're supposed to serve them. And just like I think in England, the Queen, she said, I'm going to serve you. And that's the kind of attitude that we have to take. That's the action we have to take to foster a power within culture, whether it's in the school, whether it's in the political sphere, whether it's in the business environment. How do we invite people to have more of that dialogue so that we're not just blindly brainwashed by the last 10, 20, 50 years, but we kind of go back to what the truth is versus what's in fashion right now.
Wow, that was really helpful in how you talked about like the actions of inclusivity and to explore, the larger questions of truth and the larger. It sounds like the idea of how can we bring in a diversity that represents and that allows all this sense of equity around this process, that it can't be a not single-minded, but it can't be this exclusive space. It has to be an inclusive space. There's so much I want to say, and there's so much I know that can be said on this question, but in the sake of time, we're going to move to the next one. But all those who have your hands up, I guarantee the next round, Teresa sees you and she will call you. The next question is just as tantalizing and interesting. I think this is going to definitely bring out more voices here. Teresa.
Oops, there we go. Thank you, Frederick. And just a quick sharing from our virtual audience, because a lot has been being shared by Tanya, who has been working in a school board for years as a teacher and educational psychologist. And she's just commenting a lot around how power over still continues, even just in the way that we value students' achievements over their well-being. And that there's a lot of changes that have to be made into school systems in order to help shape these students becoming tomorrow's leaders. So thank you so much for Tanya for your work in school systems and your holding of that perspective. So our next question that we kind of touched on before, doing a little shift, is just to talk about how may our current self-care paradigm be moving us away from equity and power with conditions. So how may our current self-care paradigm be moving us away from equity and power with conditions? Renata.
This one, I was listening to a podcast a couple weeks ago, and it was talking about Christian disciplines, and one of them being Sabbath, and how not everyone can practice that, because there are those that are working 7 days a week that are, he was a pastor in New York and used that a lot of his congregation are immigrants. They work 7 days and they send the money back to their family. So if they can't do a Sabbath where they take a day off of work, a day off from work each week and do nothing. And self-care, I think, falls in that same vein, because when we have people that are not white, middle class or above, any middle class or above, that are living in poverty, are living in just unknown circumstances, they don't have the luxury of looking at self-care, because they are just focusing on surviving. And for the push that society has on self-care right now, just further isolates groups of people that don't have the availability, don't have the time, don't have, you know, whatever to be able to practice that in their own lives. And, you know, it's going back to like a productivity capitalistic culture also, to where we reward those who don't practice self-care also. And so it's just, and it makes it, well, I like, this is like my little pet thing right here. Because it also makes it to where we're looking at it as individualistic instead of collective. We're looking at what self-care looks like, bath bombs and chocolate and that kind of stuff, and kind of not looking at it from a more holistic, more collective, more spiritual, more anything other than like a selfish need that we're kind of perpetrating on ourselves.
Yeah, thank you, Renata. I think the three things you touched on there was the individualism of it, the classism of it, and then the I think Staci puts external soothing, and how we've kind of made it so that it's so focused on self-care becoming it's a classist thing in terms of people buying, like you said, bath bombs or candles. But what we're really trying to do is it's become this attempt to capture an ongoing state of just always well-being. And I really like how she pulls out and says, that's not self-care, because it just really isn't possible. You know, trying to think that we need to continually work towards this place of always being great. Instead, you know, how can self-care take in the fact that we're dynamic and that change is constant? Or how can self-care actually bring in concepts of sustainability or generosity and caring for ourselves and community? So yeah, thank you for bringing in so many of these pieces that have kind of gotten pretty nuanced in this I'm sure, billion-dollar industry of self-care, and really have a bit of misguidance. Aman, love to hear from you.
Yeah, well, for people imposing oppression on others, for his self-care, he would impose for his security, feeling of security, his need for security and dignity, he would ignore what the victim talks about. And he does that in several ways, by just ignoring or saying he's a liar, or so nobody can listen to him. So which results in isolation and what else did we say? The question. Which could
paradigm of self-care.
No, the end of the question.
How it's moving us away from equity and power with systems.
Yes, So he keeps his power over the victim by this way, and obviously he just again moves us from equity. This is one thing. This is one example of people causing us this inequity and isolation. So.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
Naima.
Yeah, well, we come back to this industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the wellness industry, the self-development industry, who made billions during COVID by pushing this campaign of self-care onto people already vulnerable who genuinely want to be better and are doing their best. And they just fell into the trap of buying those online courses, and that they won't even open. 98% of them won't follow any of those well-being program by themselves, at least, or they are pushed to use medication. And so, which is not helpful, everybody knows, when it comes to trauma. But there's another thing about self-care that is also really irritating, is that we lost the plot. Self-care is not following a protocol, very rigid. Self-care is not rocket science. It's about thinking about what you put in your body, what you put in your mind, and the people you surround yourself with. Dancing, putting the music on when you wash the dishes, that's self-care. That is lifting your mood up. It doesn't need to be this program, going to gym, stay 45 minutes, and so let's make it simple. Listening a bit of music, dancing, singing is good enough. Reading a book for 5 minutes, is having a pet, taking a nap. So we are just like making self-care complicated and pushing this shame onto people even more is ridiculous. And now people believe that it costs money. Self-care costs a lot of money, and they don't have the money. I'm like, come on, put the radio on. That's it. That would do.
Thank you, Nadia. Naima. Yeah, it's and then we'll shift to our last question, but what's interesting, and something that Holly, one of our panelists, shared in our chat here, was saying how Resmaa Menakem has begun using meditation and mindfulness for police officers to help create awareness of when bias is influencing harm. And so I guess something, and in addition to what Naima said, is, have we lost a little bit of the guidance and the path, and how can we, from where we are now, not throw the baby out with the bathwater? Because a lot of times, and Staci says, like, it's all been with good intention, yoga studios and meditation courses. And what we're getting out of a lot of that is people are coming into wanting to heal and also share these practices themselves because they've benefited. And maybe at this junction, it's re-asking ourselves the question, which a lot of somatics practitioners ask, which is, for the sake of what? And I think with Staci's book, she puts this now into context of, okay, the world has kind of taken a path of, here we are in our individual healing path. And also, for the sake of what? How does this play into all these different levels of shaping sites, the family, society, community, institution, spirits, land? and how does this go into continuing us on our path of shifting to power with instead of power over. So I guess just hoping to say that people watching this who have bought the bath salts and the candles, that it's not to say don't do that if those are really helping you to take care of yourself, and maybe asking, and for the sake of what? So we are at our last question here. This might be a very interesting one, Frederick.
First, I want to say, Teresa, I have to say I have enjoyed, she's been my road partner in this conversation with all of you, but Teresa is such an amazing facilitator, and she pulls so many great conversation pieces. I want to just hands down commend you for just being all your awesomeness and showing up fully to the conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Frederick.
Yeah, and this has been such a joy. What has become conscious to you that was once unconscious? What has become conscious to you that was once unconscious? And I'm going to lead off by just saying it is powerful when you put a group of people together in different parts of the world and ask to hear each other. And to then share our stories, because that is where compassion and awareness and just growth happens. And so this moment, this consciousness, this simple book conversation is such a radical and amazing opportunity, because I would never have been able to sit in a room with you in all the places you are in the world and have such a meaningful conversation. So just this exchange in just a book can be transformative. So that is my 2 cents to the bank. I'm looking forward to hearing about your deposits. So Karen, please share with us what has become conscious to you that was once unconscious. Karen, you're still, please unmic.
I'm so sorry about that. I was saying that I concur with Holly, what she put in our panel chat, that we really need a weekend away to do this question justice, right? And so what's become conscious for me that was originally unconscious is there's a ton there, because I'm someone who studies trauma. I've been studying it for 24 years, and it blows my mind that I'm still learning and transforming and really looking at my unconscious beliefs or subconscious beliefs has been really, really powerful. I think, just to give one example, because I don't want to take too much time doing too many examples, but the one that feels most profound to me is just in my home, being a conscious parent, not being tied to power over, being in collaboration with my children. Yes, I'm still their guide, their mentor, but when I work with them in collaboration, I always get more of what I want and they get more of what they want. And it's just to me, a beautiful example of when we can let go of feeling the need to control situations or thinking that we know everything and what is best. One of my daughters is adopted, and she's multicultural, and she's just turned 13. And I'm a survivor. And one of the things that really bugs me is she likes to wear these crop tops, right? And I said to her, and I was very wrong when I said this, so I own that, okay? I said to her, when you wear shirts like that, that makes people feel like they can just go up and touch your stomach. And I know that was wrong. And she says, but Mom, does that mean they can just come up and touch my face? And I'm like, damn it, I hate it when you teach me things. And she was right. And I had to say, you know what, you were right. No one ever has a right to touch you. No matter what you're wearing, what you're doing. Thank you for reminding of your mom that's just been studying for trauma for 24 years. So she made my biases, she made them, help me make them more conscious. So thank you.
Wow, that is such a powerful story. I don't have anything to say, but that was powerful. Tamara. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I would say that, knowing that I have an internal critic and, sort of approaching it the same way that I would monkey mind, and just, thanking that critic for the job that it's done. And, I'm using some IFS terms here, but, just to be really curious about everything. I'm curious about, what that critic is doing for me, and just curious. I think that's such a important word, just how you approach, the different things that you have questions about, like with just some, like, well, what is that? What does it mean? And try not to bring too much of, your own stuff to the table.
Wow, recognizing your inner critic, not to bring too much stuff to the table. Thank you. Naima.
I was naive to believe that I could have impact as a coach, as a somatic practitioner, helping my clients in a private practice. And I realized that well-being is social well-being. That's it. That we need to fight for each other, for justice, equity for all of us, because you can do all the yoga in the world, all the meditation in the world. If the world around you is insane, nothing gonna change. So that's to go back to the beginning and our first question, that personal transformation must be systemic transformation.
I'm sorry, I have to just breathe through this. This is wow. This has been such a powerful personal transformation. Is truly collective transformation. Aman, you are the last person that I'm going to be able to call on tonight, but this has been powerful to me. I'm sorry, I'm having an emotional experience, everyone. This is powerful. This is so powerful. Aman, please take us away.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ronnie.
Yeah, the importance of adding values to the new generation, just to create a world, hopefully, with equity, cooperation, peace, and love.
Yeah, the importance of adding value. And I actually think that is a great way to end this conversation. And my summary is that there is a misbelief that we in our individual selves cannot add value. And if you know, just recently with the Me Too movement and just so many changes, it took an individual to say, no, this is not right. And I'm going to do something about it. With other people and other situations, I really believe that there is power in an individual and there's power in the collective structure. Due to the civil rights movement, some of the leaders of the American Disability Act, they decided, as we were saying, civil rights belong to different identity groups in terms of race. We also believe that belongs to people with various abilities and challenges. And so that individual began to lead a 20 to 30-year movement that led to transformation. And if anyone knows about universal design, the person who came up with the universal design theory to work with iPhones and various structures, he was someone who was wheelchair bound, and he helped transform how we engage the world. So individuals collectively can transform systems, and individuals do have value. For me, I feel like that is the most important conversation, because Staci Haines, she's an individual who brought together many voices to challenge our single story of this of the possibility. So I'm gonna stop there, but Teresa, please take us away. But wow, this has been an amazing struggle. This has been a struggle, but this has been amazing.
Thank you so much, Frederick. It is so wonderful to be able to be in discussion with you week over week and learn from you and learn from all the panelists. And yeah, I would, my closing reflection would be similar, which is one of my favorite mottos is a simple word, which is and. And I feel like in our current times where there's so much or energy, there's a lot of our culture wants to be divisive. And for us, it's when we recognize that it's usually not one or the other, but one and the other and both. And this book, I feel like for me, has helped me see that instead of getting lost in the battle of, is it me just do my individual healing? Is it systems work? Is it movement work? Is it political work? Is it community work? And there's so many things that are pulling us that then lead us to this place of this learned helplessness where we just aren't doing any action. And then maybe going to those things of trying to self-soothe, but recognizing that it's it's all of these pieces. It's yes to tending to yourself and understand what self-care is. It's yes to tending to your communities. It's yes to understand how to politicize this path of healing. And it's yes to, being in communion with nature and spirit, and seeing Staci does such a good job at really opening up these complexity of systems to help us see how interconnected they are. So I hope this us being together and doing our individual work and doing our work in our day jobs are connected to this final goal that we're all working towards. So thank you for all being a part of this, and for our online community who have been active and chatting and sharing their thoughts. We so appreciate you being with us every single week. And just to clarify, when I started, I had said, we'll see you next week, but our last session with Staci is going to be in 2 weeks, which is we're going to have a week off for Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving for those of you who are coming together and celebrating in the spirit of gratitude. And we look forward to seeing you all for our closing up session, for live Q&A session with Staci Haines. Come with your questions and thoughts, and we look forward to inviting back panelists that you have seen throughout the season. And again, big thank you to the entire team, Pat and Connor, Emma, Stephanie, and of course the co-moderator, Frederick, and all of the panelists who have shared their time and thoughts and energy with us today. So we will see you soon. Thank you all so much.